What a cheeky bunch. Okay, line your back. So I'm going to give you an example. Again, it occurred to me probably it might not make you feel very comfortable because I'm telling you stories about students in other trainings, and like you're wondering if I'm going to tell a story about you in another training. Well, if you were interesting enough, maybe I would. But, you know, you don't do anything stand out, then no, you're not going to feature in a story. I talk to you about your story. Alison, you want to be interesting, do you? You're not tall enough. It was so I can't tell you how disconcerting it was to walk into a room with the guy doing that. Anyway, so funny. It's all about me. So I've taught this series several times, obviously, in training programs. And the last time I taught it was last year in Amsterdam. And there was a beautiful young woman in that training program who has not got an arm from above the elbow on her left side. Now, this woman is she's an actor, and she's one of those most spunky people I've ever met. I never even felt tempted to rescue her from that ATM series. You know, you're leaning on your arms all the time, just putting it out there in different ways. She always came up with an adaptation herself because she was so, her ability to problem solve and deal with this, you know, it was congenital, so she'd never had a left arm just above the elbow. And it doesn't mean to say that didn't get to her. It does get to her, you know. And we had a big talk one afternoon, and she was just in tears because she's so sick of sort of adapting all the time. But I never had to she took responsibility for herself in the ATM. That's the short version of this. And she was so inventive, and, you know, things when she was meant to hold on with both hands onto feet and spinning and all this sort of stuff, she'd rig up these slings, and she'd had blocks near her all the time. So she was like the most joyous student to have in the class because that's a pretty fixed impairment, you know. And she was fine. She was fine. She was so ahead of me in terms of problem solving. So why am I telling you that story is that don't be freaked out when people have a disability. Get them to be part of the solution. You know, like, don't go in and rescue people too quickly because you rob them of that opportunity to figure it out for themselves. Now, she would have been more, if I'd kept on rescuing her, she was pretty angry. She had a lot of anger in her as well. Her and I would have got off onto a very bad foot if I'd gone in and babied her, you know. And then there's people who want to be babied. Well, you don't want to baby them either because then you're just setting up a dependency relationship. So do let people adapt and explain what's the important thing or not in a lesson about, you know, how to adapt. So like we did this morning with the head circles, you can see how, you know, you can adapt up to a point in that lesson. And if people really can't lean on their hands, what is your foolproof thing? What do you always fall back on in an ATM? They really can't do it, you do it in your imagination. And you have to set that up to not be the second best option. You have to set it up to make it meaningful for people, because a lot of folk don't believe that the mental imagery has any potency. So you need to legitimize that big time. And the way that we do that, if you've got a regular class, is to do one of those lessons that I talked about where you do it all on one side, they feel really asymmetrical. You do the other side in their imagination and they become more symmetrical. So you set up the experience to legitimize the mental imagery stuff. So that's your job as a teacher, to offer the legitimacy to whatever learning strategy they're using. Okay, so I just wanted you to lie on your back just so that you go quiet for a bit, because that's my need. And you can just notice how you are and notice if there's any influence from the head circles earlier today. If there's any parts of you that need to be taken care of. And then quietly go and get a chair, because this next lesson is on the chair. Then come back, put the chair somewhere near your mat. Oh, boo. Oh, you like chair lessons? Yeah, floor fish, yeah. Well, that's what I told you when it was all sitting. So this is the Elderly Citizen series, this one. That would, oh, imagine the interference. Ah! So have your chair near your mat so that when you want to rest on the floor, you can rest on the floor. Beautiful. I loved it. Can you go back? Hey, reversibility. Yay! Lovely, lovely. Okay. So sitting on the chair. And you can sit back in the chair for a while and notice how you're sitting. Now, the setup for this lesson this is the beginning of the Elderly Citizen series. It's called Introducing something. Let me just get my... look, I'll read out to you how he introduces. Right, this is the beginning to de novo people. Introducing ourselves, lesson 1. So you can shut your eyes if you want to. You can't go to sleep because you're sitting up. Ha, 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 ha. This series is intended for senior citizens. Senior citizens is a large group. You may have people who have all sorts of troubles, all sorts of incapacities, and all they can do for themselves is to maybe take some remedies and be alleviated one way or another. Our object is quite different, radically different. We want to help you in a way so that your last years may be the best of your life, because we will help you not only to restore mobility, ability to move, to cater for yourself, to be independent and get rid of some of the which interfere with your life, but we will allow you to get growing again. It means do some of the things that maybe at the age of 20 you didn't know how to do. You couldn't do that. And you let things, because of the difficulties of life, you let it pass. You thought one day when I have time, I will do it, and you never did it. That's quite a patter, isn't it, on the beginning of a Elderly Citizen series. So you can think about, well, maybe, actually that might be good homework. Think about how you'd introduce the series. What's the patter? Because that's got a little bit too much in it for my way of thinking, but who am I to question the master? Very inspiring. Yeah. And he's an old man himself. Like, and you can tell from his voice that he's an old man. So he has that kind of gravitas that he's talking about something that he knows about. It's not like, a 20-something. Yeah. He is, yes. Yeah. 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 It's very different to Amherst in that sense. Yeah. Which is, as you'd expect a teacher to be able to do. Is to modify your approach to different audiences. Now, this series should help the great majority of you in a way beyond what you expect. But as you are senior citizens, you have to be careful. Careful, not particularly because you rely on your life experience, on the intelligence you acquired through your experience, that you won't use brutal, idiotic force like some of the young people do and ruin their health forever. So that's really validating, you know, that you're wise now. You will be intelligent by your long experience, and you'll know that there is a great difference between learning and doing. To do a thing, you have to do it fast and strong and be the first to finish it, be the first to arrive, or whatever the aim is. But to learn, you remember, you have children. When did they start to speak? Did you give them a time limit when they have to speak? Have they been competing with each other who will speak first? Learning in such a way that anyone can benefit, that everyone can learn to speak, must be slow, timeless, just doing it. So from the start, forget. It will be difficult. I'll be reminding you of that all the time. Forget the competitiveness of your young days, because they were ruining your health before, and now they're quite impossible. So again, you get that sort of sense of how he's identifying with them as a group, that when they were young, they were competitive and they tried hard and they pushed themselves through it, and that's all come at a great toll. And now they're going to use the wisdom of their years and remember that doing is different to learning, and that if you want to learn something, you do it slowly and you do it easily. Yep. So he's starting to introduce some of these precepts, if you like, the sort of principles. Now you'll go slow. You'll pay attention not to do the thing nicely, not to compete with yourself, not to compete with anybody. You'll just be doing the thing simply, nicely, carefully, easily, and the rest, leave it to me. You'll see even in the first lesson, you'll feel a change which will help you to start the next lesson. So before we speak too long, perhaps we should start immediately now. So go and find yourself a nice chair, a simple chair if possible, without anything. Now maybe some of you cannot go out of bed, lying in bed. Then you can do it on the wall at the end of your bed. Put your feet, so he means that they can slide down the end of the bed and have their feet on the wall, like you've got your feet on the floor. So put your feet down and put something under your feet so that you're comfortable, and sit at the edge of the chair or the bed. I hope that the majority of you can sit on a chair. So what he's saying is it's better to do it on a chair if you can, but if you have to do it sitting on a bed, that's okay. If you have to do it lying down on a bed with your feet on the floor, that's okay. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe at home tonight, try this same thing on the wall. But maybe we'll do that as an exercise, do a different orientation. Okay. So a simple chair, the simplest possible, a kitchen chair, an ordinary simple chair. All right, so remember, this is an audio tape for people to do at home with no experience. Now sit at the front edge of that chair so that both feet are on the floor, squarely on the floor, and that you can sit easily. So you're sitting on the front edge of the chair. All right. Okay, so I will stop reading now because it starts to get tedious. But just you'll be okay with that. But if that's really rolly, you won't be. Okay. And we can talk about why you don't want it too rolly. I mean, you'll be fine because you're Sylvia. No, because you'll compensate, but at Joe Public, maybe not. Okay. All right. So now, if this is the first, he never says in here to shut your eyes. When I've taped it for the class in our project, I actually did say if you're comfortable to shut your eyes, because we're really trying to get people more quickly into their bodies, and I just did. So anyway, that's okay. So because most of you are comfortable with your eyes shut sitting, then you can do it with your eyes unless you feel uncomfortable. Okay. Okay, now very slowly, put both hands on your knee. So your right hand on your right knee and your left hand on your left knee. And move your right knee a little bit forward. So just the right knee, and the foot stays still on the floor. And the right knee slides a little bit forward. Now, what you might notice is that in order for the right knee to go forward, so it's actually a little bit more in front of the left knee, it's more over the toes of the foot, is that something has to happen in your right hip joint. Now, he doesn't give too many other clues than that the right hip joint also moves forward to allow the right knee to go more forward, and then bring it back to where you started, and do that many times. So you could imagine that somebody who doesn't know this, they're going to really struggle with just that first idea of, well, how can I possibly get my right knee forward? Wouldn't they? Yep. He doesn't say anything about shifting weight. So I did in my lesson, because I'm teaching, a table literally last night in my apartment. So I did eventually say something about, you might notice that you shift your weight a little bit more, but he doesn't start with a scan. He doesn't start with anything else. He just goes bang. That literally, that's all he does. So what else? Now, to me, this minimalist stuff actually is really interesting, because if we really want people to learn, actually we should be a bit minimalist. Because if we tell them what to do, it is a Pilates class, and there's nothing wrong with a Pilates class. Yeah? So it's always this balance between, do I say everything that I know, or do I say just enough and let people fill in their own gaps? You've got to I keep saying it, you've got to put your ego out the door with your shoes. This is not about you as a teacher saying all the things that you know and that you could feel. It's about letting the person find it. Now, as you notice the right knee going forward, and you might get this sensation that it's your right hip joint pushing it forward, can you pay attention what's happening in the rest of your body? So as your right knee goes forward and your right hip slides forward on the chair, what's happening in your shoulders, in the left shoulder and the right shoulder? What's happening in the trunk? Is there any turning? Are you noticing a turning in the shoulders or not? And what about the head and the eyes? Is there any influence of the sliding of the right knee forward, the right hip sliding forward with the right knee, and any movement in the trunk, in the shoulders, in the head, in the eyes? And notice if you're holding your breathing or not. So don't hold your breath if you find that you're holding your breath. Allow your breath to come in and out evenly. And keep going a few more times, and then rest. Have a rest. And sit there quietly and pay attention to the sensation in your body. And he's now saying, he literally says, I don't imagine that this has tired you, so we can continue in the next few minutes. Now move your right hip joint backwards in the direction of the back of the chair. So you can tell when I'm reading. Maybe I should just keep reading so you can tell the difference between reading and not reading, and realize why it's probably better to not read. So that's it. Taking the right hip, sliding it back towards the back of the chair, and then bringing it to the starting position again. And like you did before, so you might have noticed where the movement is happening most obviously, and that your right hip goes towards the back of the chair and your right knee gets dragged back a little bit. So it's now a little bit behind the left knee, more over the heel than the toes. What's happening in the rest of your body? Can you pay attention to what's happening in your trunk as your right hip slides back? What's happening in your shoulders? As your right hip goes back, what's happening in your head and your eyes? And then they come forward. Are you still breathing? And so for most people, what they're noticing is now their body's twisting a little bit to the right. So as the right hip goes back, that their shoulders and their face and their nose turns a little bit to the right. Can you sense that? And now next time you come back to the beginning position, push your right hip and right knee forwards. And notice that that turns your body a little bit towards the left. And then as you come back, keep your hip and your knee going all the way back where it did just now. So that you do the two movements. One, the knee goes forward, you come back to the starting position and you keep going back so that your right hip goes back to the chair. And then it comes forward, all the way forward. And can you pay attention to the movement of the trunk and the shoulders? And so for most people, that will feel like a little twist to the left as your right knee goes forward. And as your right knee goes backward, a little twist to the right. And all the time you keep on breathing. Very slowly and always only as big as, make the movement only as big as feels easy. So remember, this isn't a gym class or an exercise class. You're going slowly, easily, gently, resting when you need to. So because I was taping this, I was constantly saying also, if you need to turn the tape off and have a full rest, that's fine. So now at this point, he says, now if by any chance your right hip joint or your knee ache and you can't do this movement, don't worry. Do this part of the movement. Everything I've said up until now, do it mentally. Just imagine yourself moving the right hip joint forward and backward, and imagine your body twisting to the left and twisting to the right. So with your hip joint forward, you twist to the left. With the hip joint backward, you move to the right. So you can do that part mentally. You will see that if you have pain and you have some maybe arthritis of the hip or any trouble in the knee, you'll find that by imagining the movement, your body mobilizes itself just as if it were doing the movement. And after a few trials, you'll be surprised to find that some movement becomes possible, and you'll see in the long run this will go on progressing and improving. Okay, so he's now set that up, but he set that up quite a way into the sequence. Yeah. Now you could just teach the movement on one side and do this all on the left in your imagination if you're running this as a class. Okay. Now for all the others who are lucky enough not to have that trouble, keep on moving your hip joint forward and backward, allowing your body to turn right and left. And he says again, when you go backward, you're turning to the right, and when your right hip's going forward, you turn to the left. Now, again, because he's not watching the class, he's being very precise, and he repeats it many, many times. That linking of the forward means a twist to the left, and a backward means a twist or a turn to the right. So those of you who are asking about the right and the left stuff, if you can't remember, if I'm teaching a class with lots of rights and lefts, I write it down big time, and I have my finger there because sorry to tell you, after all these years, still have real trouble with rights and lefts. It's just my little personal dyslexic journey. So if there's a real thing, especially if there's spirals and stuff, I write it down and I follow it religiously. And yeah, I'm probably the worst person I know for getting lefts and rights mixed up. But I very rarely do it in class, because when it's really important, I write it down, and you'll see me doing it and checking it. So today, for example, with the shoulders on the ears, I didn't have it written down particularly. I wasn't looking at the writing, but I was doing it to make sure that I would do it and then say it. Yeah. Hands on knees. Not over knees, just on top. That's it. Yeah. He says knees, but if it's thighs, it doesn't matter. Yeah. If you imagine that you were an older person, you wouldn't be sitting up so tall, and you probably would be it'd be easy to get your hands on your knees. Okay. Yeah. Too confusing. He wants people to move first and try it first. Yeah. You'll find a lot of resistance to mental imagery. You not necessarily in this room, because we're used to it, and certainly now compared to, say, in the 90s when it was considered quite weird. It's better understood now than it was, but you'll still find a lot of resistance, people thinking that this is a load of hooey. And it's all about, they think it's sort of new agey, la stuff. So sit back in your chair and have a rest sitting back in your chair. Yeah. Yeah, we would never start with imagery unless people are really familiar with it, familiar with the method. So as you're sitting back in your chair, now just notice a little bit if there's any difference between the right and the left. Now, interestingly, in this lesson, he didn't set up a scan at the beginning. So he didn't hit them with something that's a little bit esoteric to start with. He just got them to doing something quite practical. So now he's doing a scan. Is that right? Is that wrong? It's neither. It's just how it is. It's just what he did. Yeah. Okay. So can you feel it? Is there a difference between right and left? You have to allow for the possibility that there might not be a difference between the right and the left, and they haven't compared it before. They don't know what they don't know what that would feel like. So again, can you imagine what it would be like being a newbie and being asked to compare the difference between the right and the left? Pretty esoteric concept. So give them some clues, like the way, can you sense your right shoulder versus your left shoulder? And I think when I was taping it last night, I gave them some clues, like, your right side might feel, bigger than the left, or heavier, or even lighter. It might feel longer. It might feel different in some way, any of those ways. Everybody's different. And if they don't feel a difference, that's fine. And the whole point of these classes is to learn to feel a difference so that you can become more aware of your body and more aware of the bits that you do know, more aware of the bits that you actually don't even know you've got, so that you can use them better. That's what I said at this point. He didn't say that. I'd said that. And notice that the breathing that's happening in the chair as you're sitting. So again, he didn't set this up at the beginning. And don't do anything special for the breathing, just let it happen. You don't have to breathe deeply or nicely or correctly. Just notice how you're breathing. So it's a very validating thing that how they're breathing is perfectly fine. It's a question of just noticing, simply noticing. Where is it? How do you know you're breathing? Okay, so it's a very brief introduction to this idea of having a scan and some reference points. So come back to the front of the chair and get that sense of having a bit of weight on under your feet, and the weight of your bottom on the chair. So now I'm adding in some more reference points that they can sense the weight. And this is where when I did the lesson last night, because now that they're aware that they've got a bit of weight, a bit of pressure on their feet and a bit of pressure on their bottom, now I can actually get them to feel the weight shift ready for the slide. Okay. So begin again to move your right hip forward. So your right knee and your right hip, and your hands are, he says, of course, on your knees. And he's a very confident teacher. So he simply says, and now while you move your right knee forward, you'll notice the body twists a little bit more than before to the left. So he's extremely confident that people are going to come back from that rest and find it even easier. That may be your experience, it may be not. And now the next time that you slide your right knee and your right hip forward, can you accentuate a little bit the turning of your head and your eyes to the left? So use the movement of the right hip and the right knee to really turn the head and eyes a little bit more than was happening before. So you could imagine that you really want to see a little bit more round to the left. So he says, without making any peculiar or particular strain, just turn your head a tiny bit and the eyes to look a little bit more to the left, accentuate it. And then bring your right hip back again. And of course, that brings your eyes and your head coming back to the front. And continue to do that. So the right hip and the knee forward, turning your eyes to the left, the head to the left, having a look to the left, and then coming backwards. And continue to do that and just allow that movement to accentuate the turn of the right knee forward and turning to look to the left and then back to the starting point. So you accentuate, but not more than you can do comfortably, not more than you can do easily, without any strain or compulsion or awkwardness. And again, pay attention to, do you like it when I'm reading or do you like it when I'm talking? Does that help you? Do you? Because you know I'm talking about his master's voice. I can't stand it when people read myself, but that's okay. I guess actually the point is, if I'm doing both, you know that I'm watching you. But if I just read the whole time, I can guarantee your experience will be that I'm not with you. Yeah. Well, I can't guarantee that that's experience, but I would bet my mortgage on it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but don't write it. I don't write it word for word. I just write the shorthand. And that's the way to stop yourself reading, is to write the shorthand. Yep. Now, next time you come back to the front, so back to the starting position, moving your right hip joint forward, knee forward, allow your shoulders to go to the left, but keep your head and your eyes facing the front. So the right knee and the right hip slide forward and the shoulders turn to the left, but you keep your head and your eyes facing the front so they don't twist to the left now. So it's just the legs sliding forward, turning the spine and the shoulders to the left, but the head stays looking towards the front. Do that a few times. That's it. And the next time you come back to the starting position, you can make the whole movement so the hip goes backwards as well, which means that the trunk and the shoulders go a little bit to the right as the right hip goes back, but still the head stays looking at the front. Now go through the whole cycle. So the knee goes all the way forwards easily, comfortably, and the shoulders turn to the left. The head and the eyes stay forward, and the knees slide back. The knee slides back, the hip goes back to the chair, the shoulders turn to the right, and the hip stays full. Head and eyes stay forward. That's it. Okay, just leave that and then do once or twice the knee movement and allow the head and the shoulders to move with the trunk as the knee goes forward and back. Allow everything to move as it wishes. And particularly paying attention as the right knee and the hip go forward. Do you find that it's getting more easy to move to the left, to turn to the left? Can you see a little bit further to the left than when you first started? That's it, good. And rest in the back of your chair. Slide back and have a good rest against the back of the chair. If you really need to get off the chair, you can lie on the floor, but it will only be a little bit, only a little tiny. Go on, do it, Philippa. You know you want to. And as you're sitting there, just close your eyes and turn your head a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left and notice if there's any difference. Do you have a preference which is easier, to turn a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right? And notice what your knees do when you turn to the left and the right. That's it. Okay, come to the front of the chair again. Again, sensing the weight under your feet and under your bottom. Hands over the top of your thighs or the knees. And now this time, begin the little tiny gentle movement of sliding your left knee forwards. So remembering that the left knee can slide forwards if the left hip slides forward on the chair. And keep on bringing it back to the starting position and then sliding it forwards and bringing it back to the starting position. Do it small, slow. And what do you remember from the feeling of doing it on the right? Can you transfer that to this leg? So you might feel a little bit of a shift of weight from onto the right side of your bottom so that the left hip joint can slide forward. So I've added that bit. He never says that. He never says about weight shift. Now, the other thing that you might want to remember when you're teaching this lesson, it's much easier to do on a vinyl chair than an upholstered chair because of the sliding. So that's about understanding environmental features. Again, he doesn't say it. He says you can do it on a bed. This would be hard on a bed because it's so squishy. Yeah. And it needs to, it's ideal to do it on a chair that's about calf height so that, your thighs are relatively parallel to the floor. That's just me saying. He doesn't ever talk about that. He's very pragmatic. Okay, good. So you're still sliding the left knee forward. Now noticing what else in you moves as your left knee slides forward. What happens in your trunk, in your shoulders, your head and your eyes. So do you notice that they turn a little bit to the right? So the left leg goes forward, becomes a little bit longer, and bring it back again. The body twists to the right, and then as the left knee comes back to the starting position, the body comes also back to facing the front. And then continue the movement so that as your left hip joint comes back to the starting position, it keeps going in the direction of the back of the chair. So now your left knee is not only going forwards, but when it comes back, it goes even further back than where you started from. So how do you organize that movement? of taking the left hip joint back towards the chair. Left knee goes forward. Left knee goes back. And which way does the body twist as the left knee goes forward? Body twists to the right. And as the left knee goes backwards, do you notice a tendency for your body to want to twist to the left? Is it just in the pelvis, or is it your shoulders, the head, the eyes? Good. And then next time your left knee comes forward, can you accentuate that movement so that you really, it's like you really want to look to the right, and you feel that the pushing of the left knee forward helps you look to the right. That's it. Do that a few times. So you feel this connection between the left knee coming forward and you're looking to the right. Now, next time you come back to the middle, pause there, pause at the starting position, and push the right knee forward, as if you're going to push your right knee forward to look to the left. So the right knee comes forward, the right hip comes forward and pushes your eyes to the left. You come back to the middle, your left knee comes forward and pushes your eyes and your head to the right. So you can alternate. The pushing of the hip and the knee forward turns you in the other direction. So the right knee turns you to the left. The left knee coming forward turns you to the right. Slowly, easily, ever so gently, he says. Leave it and rest. Sit on the back. Sit at the back of the chair. Have a nice rest. Notice any difference between the right and the left. Maybe there's not so much difference now because we've done the movement both ways. Notice your breathing. The weight on the right and the left of your buttock and the right and left feet. Good. And come to the front of the chair again. And this time, push your left knee and hip forward so that your eyes and your shoulders and your head turn to the right, and stay there for a moment. So the left knee comes forward, left hip, and your eyes and your head are to the right and your shoulders. Now stay there, and now keep your eyes and your head and your knee there, and just bring your shoulders back to the front. But everything else stays to the right. So your left knee's forward, but just your shoulders come back to the front. And then they go to the right again, but your head and the eyes always stay still, looking to the right. That's it. This is really hard. I wouldn't say that in an ATM. This is really hard. Just setting people up. And then let that go. Come back to the front and then do the whole thing as originally. Push your left knee and left hip forward and allow all of you to move to the right. And notice how easily that goes. How far can you look? That's easy, comfortable, light. Now, next time, go again and stay to the right. So push your left knee forward, left hip forward, turning your body to the right. Now leave just your head and your eyes looking to the right and bring your shoulders and your hip joint and your knee back. And then bring them forward again on the left. And all the time, your head and your eyes stay to the right while your shoulders and your hip move kind of underneath them forward and back to the beginning. Do that a few times. Slowly, easily. That's good. And then everything come back to the front. Everything come back to the front. And again, turn everything to the right. So push your left knee forward, left hip forward, and allow everything to the right. And notice, how does that feel now? How's the turning and the looking? Good. Come back to the front. Pause for a moment. There's one more variation. Actually, he's got a couple. We'll just do one more variation. Okay, so sitting on the front of the chair. Now this time, alternate sliding your right knee forward and allowing your shoulders to turn to the left, and then coming back and the left knee going forward and your shoulders turning to the right. But your head and your eyes always stay looking at the front. But you're alternating, sliding one knee forward and then the other knee forward. But your eyes and your head always stay in the front. And this is the panther move. This is the hunting move. He doesn't say that, that's me. Absolutely, absolutely. And then let that go. And the next time your right knee goes forward, allow all of you to turn to the left and see how that is for you now. How far can your eyes and your head go easily? And then come back to the start. Then your left knee goes forward and turns you to the right. And how far is that going? Is it still easier one way than the other, or do you like both ways now? And then he does one more little thing. And to me, this is really a nice thing to do because it's kind of referencing what this is all about. He says, now just sit quietly in the front of the chair and turn to look to the left and turn to look to the right. So he's leaving now. I'm just telling you what I think he's doing. He's not telling you now to do it from the knees. He's saying simply look to the left and look to the right. So this is the integrating movement. Can you see why? Because this is the function of looking to the left and looking to the right. And then he says, now notice what's happening anyway in your hips and your knees. So for most people, you are still using that new strategy of sliding your pelvis. So that's the new thing, right? That's the part that we freeze in ourselves. Our pelvis is not free to move. We're not free to slide on the chair. We sit like a bag of spuds. He's wakened up our hip joints, and then he's leaving the hip joints, saying, just turn and look left and look right. Aha, notice there's something in those little hip joints. Okay, that's the integration moment of the lesson. Yep. Okay, and then he says, guiding yourself with your eyes, looking with your eyes more to the right, more to the left, and note that your body twists exactly like before in spite of everything. So that now that movement is in your psyche, as it were, the sliding, you will use it because you're aware of it, but you'll use it subconsciously now. Okay, that's Feldenkrais. Yeah. Now pause, just sit back in your chair, rest, and feel the breathing. And how do you feel? How does your spine feel? What does it feel? I'll read now, he says. Now stop a second, move backwards into your chair and observe this positioning of your back, what it feels like to breathe like that, what it feels like in the shoulders, in your face. And now sitting like that with your hands on your knees, just move your head right and left and see whether it's easier to move them before you started. And if so, cheerio until the next. Cheerio. Okay, so that's a final piece of integration. All right. So he doesn't get people to get up and walk because he doesn't know whether they can walk or not. He's just leaving it like that. Okay, so it's 4 o'clock. You've got time to think about all the different permutations of that lesson. Now, they're all on the same kind of theme, aren't they? I think I've told you what the theme is, and then the variations. And as you said, it's really, it's yet another version of the dead bird. So it's an ATM about rotating. It's about, rotation around a roughly central axis, but it's not because you're going from one hip to the other, but that's okay. So all that kind of weirdo analysis that we got you to do in the first piece of homework in May would hold true for this lesson, isn't it? But it's just done in a position that's not as demanding as the dead bird. It's not side sitting. So some of the things aren't as obvious, and he's not doing the differentiations of flexion and extension that you did in the dead bird, and the pelvis doing it on one hip, which is really obvious. But there's a taste of all of that in there. Does that kind of make sense? There's the eyes, the head, the shoulders. He doesn't differentiate the chest. He doesn't talk about the chest. He only says spine, but it's actually the trunk. You can differentiate the chest from the pelvis, turning if you wanted to, but he doesn't in that lesson. He keeps it quite simple. Shoulders, head, eyes, hips, knees. That's the only bits that he ever talks about. Hands on knees. So you can get into groups of 2 if you like, and think about the possible write down all the instructions that you can remember, and then you're going to turn that into a 3-minute miracle. So how could you pick out the eyes of that? What would you do? Because you could do that in the restaurant chair, couldn't you? You could do that in the farty Melbourne bistro. In a farty Melbourne bistro.